there, welcome back to my channel, Hasty Books. I'm Camilla and today I'm doing a reaction to a book prize again. So the Baillie Gifford, the prize for nonfiction for 2022, they've just released their shortlist. Before we jumped straight into that, while I go online and check it out, I thought I'd give a couple of comments on the long list. I was going to do a reaction for the long list when it came out, which actually was very kind of recently, but then it was postponed due to the Queen's death. And then I saw the list and I'm not gonna lie, it just wasn't as exciting as I thought it was going to be. Like, I wasn't that pulled in by the books. My quick thoughts are that it's an extremely white list. Even some of the stuff is literally about, refugees, about racism, and it's like written by white people. So I had some thoughts about that. But anyway, there were a few books that I was very keen on though. That includes Legacy of Violence, A History of the British Empire by Caroline Elkins. That I thought was really interesting, and I feel like because, and I know it's in alphabetical order, but because their list started with that, I think that's why they postponed the announcement, because a lot of debate around colonialism and the empire came out around the time that the Queen passed away. So anyways, it was all quite interesting, and it feels really relevant to all of that discourse. Next, I was actually quite interested by Otherlands by Thomas Halliday. This is like a one-liner. It's a dazzlingly original, lyrical, and epic encounter with the earth as it used to be. And I believe that's a Scottish author. So that one really interested me. I think I have put a hold on my library and I'm still waiting for it. We'll see. Then Daisy Hayes' book, Dinner with Joseph Johnson. I was like, book about a white man. I was like, don't know if I'm really into that kind of, biography, stuff like that. But then I read more into it and it sounds really cool, especially for a bookworm. Like the subtitle is Books and Friendship in a Revolutionary Age. And it's about this guy, Joseph Johnson, who would have these dinners, I think it's once a week, with like personalities of the era. So yeah, that sounds really interesting. I've not been able to find a copy yet, but maybe one day. Next, I was sort of interested by The Barefoot Woman by Scholastic Mukasonga from Rwanda. I looked it up. Obviously, I would prefer to read it in French since I read in French, since it's La Femme aux Pieds Nus. This book came out 10 years ago, so it feels really bizarre that it's now on the list, but obviously it's because it's probably just been translated and published. But maybe if one day I find a French copy, I will read it. And finally, the last book that I was quite keen on was Kingdom of Characters, A Tale of Language, Obsession, and Genius in Modern China by Jing. And this is a riveting, masterfully researched account of the bold innovators who adapted the Chinese language to the modern world, transforming China into a superpower in the process. So I thought that sounded really cool. This isn't a prediction or anything that I did there. It's just 5 books that kind of jumped out at me that were more on my interest. And a lot of the other books, potentially, I think it's just that topics are less interesting to me personally. So it's just really a question of taste there, rather than is the book good enough or not? Because I don't know, I have read none of these books. But let's look into it. I will Google the list right now and we can see. Baillie Gifford, shortlist. Okay. The shortlist has been announced. Okay. Okay. So the shortlist is Legacy of Violence, A History of the British Empire by Caroline Elkins. So I feel like I thought that this is where this was definitely gonna get shortlisted. I know that when I watched a predictions video by Olive from a book Olive, she said she'd done a bit of research and she saw there was a lot of like typical books or like topics that would get listed for this prize, and a kind of British history book would be more likely to make it. So that's kind of makes sense. Second, we have The Escape Artist, The Man Who Broke Out of Auschwitz to Warn the World by Jonathan Freedland. I thought actually this one just didn't make it on my top 5 from the long list. And it was just because I'm not as interested to read about the Holocaust and World War II generally. But it sounded like an interesting perspective into that, following obviously that man who broke out of Auschwitz. Or is it, I think, the first man who broke out? Anyway, so yeah, big congrats. Next we have My Fourth Time We Drowned, Seeking Refuge on the World's Deadliest Migration Route by Sally Hayden. Actually, that sounds really interesting to me. It's just that I had issues with it being written by a white person, but I guess sometimes it needs that voice, right? It needs like that journalistic approach to like, here's what's happening, we need to pay attention. And I heard that Hayden does a lot of work like that, so I don't want to just judge it. But I like to read stories by refugees themselves. Actually, I have one of my book here that I put in the background, Hope Not Fear by Hassan Akkad, is a kind of own voice refugee story. So yeah, but I'm guessing this one's gonna be a bit more broad. It clearly talks about the world's deadliest migration route, and I'm hoping it's gonna be an overall look into it. Maybe if I get a copy, I would read it at some point, but we'll see. In fourth place, there's no place, it's just a list in alphabetical order, is The Restless Republic, Britain Without a Crown by Anna Keay. I am not sure how I pronounce that correctly. I just really wasn't that interested in that, actually, I'm not gonna lie. This is clearly about the time that Britain was a republic, so like kind of Oliver Cromwell kind of era. I learned about it while I was studying for my life in the UK test, and I feel like that's something that's mentioned, you know, in history when I was little, but I'm not really that keen to read about that. Next is A Fortunate Woman, A Country Doctor's Story by Polly Morland. I think that this is like a story about a story. I'm not sure. I just wasn't that interested in it. It just didn't kind of appeal to me as like a larger narrative. But again, I haven't looked more into it. And finally, we have The Super Infinite, The Transformations of John Donne by Catherine Rundell. And that's one of the only books that I was able to find a copy of. But I wasn't that keen that I was going to read it. So I'll be back in mid-November, probably around 17th, 18th of November. We'll see when I post my video, when they make the winner announcement, so I'm kind of keen to see. At the moment, I hope it's Legacy of Violence, but also I feel like all of these books, I feel like probably have the kind of gravitas to maybe win. I'm a little disappointed in general by the shortlist, but that's just my personal taste. So next one is Nonfiction November. I don't know that I will be adding any of these to my TBR, but you know, a big congrats to those authors. I'm sure like they must have done so much research, like so much work, and clearly it's being recognized, which is great. I would love to know if you've read any of these books, or even some of the books I've mentioned earlier in the video that were kind of interesting to me from the long list, which most of them haven't been shortlisted. Yeah, I would love to know what you thought, or which one was your favorite to be shortlisted. Was it shortlisted? Was it not? Let me know what you think. As always, thank you so much for watching, and hasty back. Bye!